So this is my second try at making this video. I originally had planned to talk about multiple lifts in this video, but I think I just kind of ramble too much, and I want to keep it a bit more simple because I think what's most interesting with what I'm going to go over here is deadlift technique. And the whole premise of this video is to run over my lifter Justin's technical, I guess, transformation from when we started versus now. We've touched technique on all three lifts, and again, I was gonna run over both squat and deadlift, but I ended up making pretty much a whole video just on deadlift, and it got a bit long. So I think I'm just gonna run over deadlift in this video because that's what's the most interesting. Squat was a bit more simple, so there's not a whole lot of detail to go into with that. So we're just gonna make this about deadlift. So I'm gonna run through a quick case study on my lifter Justin and what exactly we did to avoid A, force production issues with deadlift, and B, pain related issues with deadlift from a technique perspective. Um, and then I'll go through essentially just what the issues were, how we fixed them, and also just a couple minor programming things that we did to complement this issue as well. So to get right into it, so I don't make another 20-minute yap about this, and I can just kind of keep it a bit concise. Um, Here is the first ever deadlift video I saw from Justin when we first started working together. I think we started in early December of last year, so it's been about probably a little under 7 months or so. Um, but this was his final heavy deadlift of meet prep from a meet that he did in, I think, late November. So you can see we got 212.5 on the bar. This would be, I believe, what was an all-time PR at the time. And we've got a couple things technically that we can unpack here, okay? He's got no issues with lockout or anything of that nature. So, we don't need to touch anything there in terms of, whether that be a grip issue or center of mass control issue at lockout. The biggest issue that we were running to is literally just force production off the floor. And you can see right as that bar leaves the floor, he runs into an issue with maintaining the push at the quads. And you can see once he produces force, the hips and the knees shoot back away from the bar. And what that was causing was unpredictability with being able to produce force on these heavy loads, because it would just be super awkward, and honestly it would happen on virtually everything regardless of how heavy it was, and B, pain, because he was actually getting some glute issues that arose from this. So what I want to take a peek at here is specifically, like I mentioned, what's happening immediately off the floor, okay? You can see he wedges into the bar with a certain amount of knee bend, right? This is right before the bar leaves the floor, this screen grab right here. He's got a certain amount of knee bend as he wedges into the bar, and then he will lose all of that immediately. And essentially his legs will be pretty much fully straight, and he's just kind of using his back to get the weight up from here. And here's the after video I want to take a look at. This would be a 7.5 kilo training all-time PR, like 7.5 kilos more than he's ever done in training, compared to this 212 here on the left. So massive, sign that things are moving in the right direction. And what I want us to take a look at here is what's going on off the floor. And you can see he's able to maintain so much more push off the floor without having everything shoot back. And that's really what the ultimate issue was. He would kind of just like stiff leg his deadlift off the floor, but obviously that wasn't a cueing thing or general like thought process behind the movement. It was just because of the starting position that he was getting into as he wedged into the bar and started to produce that force. And you can see he will do that, right? Wedges into the bar with a certain amount of knee bend, and then there's no gigantic shoot back to the point that he's in this awkward extended position like he is on the left side here. And overall is just able to maintain a ton more push off the floor. So here's a side view, and I think this is going to be what we can unpack the most because this is a bit more telling. So the left side is 175 kilos. I think this is a video from our very first block together. And on the right side is 147.5. The only reason I picked this video on the right is this is kind of like the after video. It's just a similar side view to the left-hand video here from when we made these technical interventions, and it's just an overall good visual example, loading aside. So if we take a look at how this looks, it's going to be a bit offset just because he sets up a lot quicker on the right side in the after video. But you can see the difference in how things look off the floor, right? If you look at this left side here, he will wedge into the bar, and then everything just shoots back right away, and he does not have any push at the quads. And that's the big thing that we were really, really trying to get rid of. If we look at the left side here, he essentially will wedge into the bar and immediately turn it into pretty much like a stiff leg RDL hamstring reliant deadlift. And while you're obviously going to be using the posterior chain to get the weight up on a conventional deadlift or a deadlift in general, we need to have a component of push in order to produce force. And that's what he was lacking. And it was due to the position he was getting down to at the bar, aka his starting position, and ultimately how we got him there. And now if you take a look at the right side, this is a multi-rep set, you can see he's able to maintain that push off the floor and keep the quads into the equation without it turning into this really, I guess, stiff-leggy type wedge where everything shoots back immediately. So the question is, how were we able to pinpoint what to fix, and how did we ultimately fix it? So again, I'll be referring to this side-by-side here of these direct side views a lot. But ultimately what the biggest issue is starting position, right? For Justin, we needed to get his back more rounded, simply put. Someone who's built like him with a short torso and very long legs, he's able to most likely get into an okay position at the bar. It's just a matter of how he's able to do that. He's not necessarily the, sumo deadlift specialist with the shorter torso, longer arms, very, very upright position by any means. He's just a longer legged person with a shorter torso. And when you pull conventional with leverages like Justin's, it can be pretty detrimental to get yourself out of rounding. And here's a good example of why, right? You can see, like I mentioned, the second he goes off the floor, everything just kind of shoots back. So what was happening was the lack of upper back rounding would keep his hips too low, and it would keep his hips too far away from the bar to the point that he couldn't get them in to get the quads in the equation, get that wedge, and get that push into the bar in the first place. Like, that's what he was ultimately lacking. The hips were not getting into the bar, therefore he would not be getting the push into the bar with the quads, or into the floor with the quads, and it had to do with what that upper back was doing. When you round your upper back, it is going to change the, I guess, relativity from your hips to the bar. And you can see in this side-by-side here, he's able to get his hips and his knees a bit closer to the bar with a more rounded back position, okay? That's ultimately what we were going for. So pretty much the big theme here is embrace the round to complement his leverages, okay? So how did we exactly go about doing that? We did two things, okay? It was ultimately that being the end goal, but we did two things. We approached things from multiple ways and strategies, but there were two big things that really helped out. So the first thing is literally to just bias into rounding. But that worked to an extent, and it helped him feel the push off the floor, but it wasn't as consistent and it wasn't as reliable as we were hoping. So that was really the first thing. If we take a look at the side-by-side here, this is the position he's getting into at the top before he gets down to the bar. You can see on the left side, his back is pretty straight. He's by no means biasing into too much extension or getting himself into this disadvantaged position by forcing to keep his back straight, but he's definitely not biasing into flexion or rounding his back, right? Versus this right side here, you can see before he even gets down to the bar, that upper back is in a little bit more of this rounded, scrunched position. And what we were kind of cueing at the time was to really, really feel the context into the belt when he braced, okay? Feel those front abs kind of push and squeeze and scrunch into the belt. And what that will do is when you have that kind of push out and scrunch into the belt, it's going to depress your rib cage and get that upper back into the position that we wanted it to, right? So that was the first thing, is off the bat before he went down to actually grab the bar and produce force in the first place, was to just bias into more rounding off at the top and kind of squeeze and scrunch down into that belt. From there, you can see the biggest difference side by side here is how much time he's spending down at the bar. And that was the second big thing that helped out. Um, by no means are we trying to rush anything, but ultimately what was happening is once we started to try to bias into rounding, it was pretty challenging for Justin to just round his back. Like the concept made sense to him. I was explaining, okay, what's the goal behind this, etc. But just rounding the back was a bit tricky for him to do and maintain. And the reason for that was how much time he was spending down at the bar. So he could, as much as he wanted to, get that initial scrunch and round at the top, but because he was spending so much time down at the bar, he would eventually just kind of flatten out. Okay, and you can see he's spending a good like 5, 6, maybe even 7 seconds on some sets down at the bar. He doesn't need to do that, especially with someone who pulls conventional and pulls mixed grip. I'm almost always going to try to bias them into this top down setup. Oftentimes, when you are at the top on the conventional deadlift, it can be a bit easier to get a brace into the belt just with how you're kind of stacked and aligned, and you're not already in this rounded position, right? So that was a big thing. It's just avoiding spending too much time down at the bar, because the more time he spent down at the bar, the more he would actually get out of the rounding that he would get at the bat. And we were definitely making progress. Like he wasn't as straight backed as he was before, but it was just a lot more challenging of a position to maintain because he's getting out of that position for more time. So again, that's the biggest thing we did. Was I told him, we've got to bias fully into a top-down setup, okay? You can kind of argue on this left side here, he's a bit bottom-up. Usually what I will consider a bottom-up setup is someone's hands are going to be on the bar before they brace. So they're kind of going to be setting up around the bar, holding onto that bar, bracing down at the bar, and then the wedge in, right? Versus a top-down setup is when you brace at the top before you go down to grab the bar, in short. So what we needed to do was exactly that. He would kind of brace at the top, and again, we worked on that initial scrunch and that initial rounding a bit, and we kind of worked on bracing there, but ultimately he would brace right here as he's about to grab the bar on this left side view is what I'm referring to. And then he would, right, grab the bar and wedge, okay? So what we did was, like I mentioned, bias out of the bottom-up setup and bias fully into the top-down setup. And I'm going to refer back to this 220 video because this is, again, the heaviest deadlift he's ever taken, ever. This is an all-time PR, 7.5 kilos more he's ever done in training. And you can see putting all of these concepts together, he would get that rounding off the bat, scrunch into that belt at the top a little bit, and then pretty much just go down and grab the bar from there without dilly-dallying at the bar and spending more time down at the bar than he needed to, which would get him out of that rounded position. You can see, I already showed this video, but you can see not spending any more time than he needs to down at the bar. He's able to maintain a really, really good push through the floor with the quads. Pretty much every single day of feedback for a long time now since we've changed this is, okay, you know, I really feel the push. Like the quads feel like they're working. There's also no pain. We haven't had pain on deadlift in a long time. There's no awkward shooting back of the hips and the knees the second he wedges into the bar. So it's easily by far the best deadlift he's hit to date. And technique looks super good. You know, he's not overly rounded. He's not kind of getting into, you know, kind of this like fishing line deadlift he would before, right? Like he would just lose all the push, lose the legs, and just kind of use that back to kind of force the weight up from there. Versus now, we are intentionally getting that rounding off the bat, wedging in, and able to maintain that push off the floor. So I'm going to play this side angle of both of these in comparison again, and then I'm going to play one more video, and then I'll get into a couple minutes of some minor programming stuff we did, because in my opinion, a lot of the time when you're trying to make a technical change, you've got to complement it with programming more often than not. So Here's the side view. That right side braces at the top, goes down, grabs the bar without wasting any extra time down at the bar, and he is able to maintain the position that he's initially getting in the entire time. The push stays through the floor. There's no awkward immediate shooting back. It looks fantastic. This video right here of 160 kilos is a back offset from the day he pulled 220, which is actually the day before I'm making this video. But you can see this is just an overall really fluid set and is a good example of how we pieced everything together. There's no, just kind of repeating myself at this point, but there's no awkward shaking, no awkward shoot back. The quads are maintaining that push. He has kind of like what we would consider to be good rounding to complement his leverages, and overall it just looks fantastic. So I'll go over some minor programming stuff for a couple minutes, but ultimately what we really did to help technique out was with actually coaching technique, okay? So I'm going to go over a couple minor things, but because we were ultimately running into some pain issues due to the technique stuff that I just ran through, we didn't really push deadlift much at all for almost a full macro cycle. So we have block 1, 2, and 3 together here. Actually, was it 1, 2, 3? 1, 2, 3. Let me check. Okay, so we did 4 block macro cycle here. I believe 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. And overall, did not really push deadlift. We were running into some pain issues. So you can see this block 1, we ended on this impromptu pullback here. And then to end the macro cycle, we ended around like an 8 RPE. This was a PR double, and this was kind of when things were starting to string together. Because initially, in terms of timeline, we just started to approach things from just try to round your back more. And like I said, that worked a little bit, but on the heavier stuff, we were still running into issues. And then what really pieced things together is eventually biasing fully into that top-down setup. So you can see we didn't really push things, but ultimately we got into this heavy single with 220 around like a 9.5 RPE, right? So that's the first thing that we did, was we just gave it time. Like, we gave it a full macro cycle, did not force any numbers, allowed things to kind of come naturally, focused on the technique stuff at hand. We were not close to meet at all. We still are not close to meet. So we were not really rushing numbers. We were just saying, hey, here's some technique issues. We've got to address them. So that was the first thing. From a programming perspective, I'm going to run through this block he's about to start on Monday, but he's got deadlift on Monday, Thursday. And what I eventually ran into and kind of landed on, and again, this is a block he has not done yet. I'm just going to show it because it's not filled out, and it is also a good example of where the end result has landed. We do a paused full reset set on his secondary day. The reason there is because ultimately this issue is a first rep issue, which impacts the rest of the set if there's more than one rep. But it really is getting to the bar appropriately from the top down. So we need to practice that, okay? He's only going to have one rep to really practice that if we're not doing a full reset. So we're essentially getting 3 opportunities here to practice that in one set. So that's the objective there. And the pause is to really hopefully maintain that push and force him to kind of stop and feel, because when you pause, especially if it's close off the floor, if you lose that push with the quads and he kind of feels himself shoot back, he's gonna have that feeling be amplified with a pause. And then the only other minor thing we've been doing is reascending sets to make sure back off sets on his primary session stay high quality. So for example, maybe this top set goes well, and then he overshoots a second set. He might get a bit sloppy with it, etc. Right? I just find that ascending sets are a fantastic way to maintain intentionality with every single set and really be mindful of loading or maintaining focus despite the load, things like that. So in my opinion, it was just a good way for him to start light, like take his lightest back off set first after the top set, really focus on everything we worked on with technique, and then increase the load, and it just kind of gives him an opportunity to practice that on the reascending sets, if that makes sense. But yeah, ultimately, that's all we really did from a programming perspective. From there, it was just kind of nitpicking, what does he need to be strong? Is this too much? Is this too little? And then going from there. And in the grand scheme of things, it was just a technical coaching issue. But again, in my strong opinion, a lot of the times if we're making a larger scale technique intervention, it is probably best to complement that with programming in some fashion. So that is all I have to run through. Again, I'm super happy and intrigued by the way that we, organize Justin's training around fixing this big technique issue. Like I mentioned, there's a couple things I was tempted to run over on squat. Maybe I'll save that for a different video, or I'll make a couple story posts on it. But for now, that is going to be it. So if you enjoyed this, feel free to drop a comment as always. Give us a subscribe, follow us on Instagram, and I'll see you in the next video.